I'm Jackie Barry, author of the new book of Icebreakers and Energizers for Speakers and Trainers, Experiential Speaking. And I'm here today with Alex Owen-Hill. One of the things he does is talk about the importance of play in one of his keynotes as a speaker. So why don't you start off by saying a bit more about why you think play and playfulness is so important?
The play keynote came out of something that I was just interested in at the time, which was improv. And I thought, I wonder whether the audience might respond to this in a good way. And it turns out that people enjoy doing those sort of things as the audience. So that one came up as, the importance of play and why we as adults need to play more, because it is just really important, I think.
And what is the answer to that question then? Why do we as adults need to get in touch with our childlike playfulness?
I think because we all are children, really. So a lot of the work that I do on myself as a performer, like I do like improv and clowning and a lot of other things that are sort of related, that what you're doing is getting back in touch with that playful version of yourself. And what I've seen is that people that do the work also discover that. So it's just there. I think we've just sort of masked it under all of these levels of, oh yeah, I'm a serious adult with all of these intellectual thoughts and like I'm going to treat things seriously. But as soon as you get people even out, in a field running around throwing a ball around, people become more childlike. So I think it's there anyway. People enjoy it.
I agree. I think we're born that way and then it's educated out of us, and it's lovely to be reminded that it was always there and it's so much fun, and actually that's what life's about. But as a speaker and a trainer, it's getting your audience or your delegates, your participants to be playful. For me, I find a better way to get them to learn something.
If you've got a very complex topic, it's better to get more of your body involved in learning it, because what we often do, and myself as well, like I have a PhD in robotics. I'm a very thinky person. I go, oh yeah, I recognize that bit of information, or I understand what that person said. So I go, tick, I understood that. Whereas then later I'll look back at it and it'll be like, yeah, I didn't quite get that. Whereas if you get your whole body involved, and even if it's just speaking out or playing with the idea verbally, that sticks a lot better.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I learned when I did a degree in psychology years ago, that the more ways you can code a memory in your brain, the more chance there is of recalling it when you need to. So that's visual and auditory and kinesthetic and all the other senses and all the other ways that you can remember things. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why handwriting something makes you remember it more than typing it, because it uses more mental processing, and the more mental effort you put when the memory's laid down, the stronger the memory is when you need it back. And again, when we're talking about people needing to learn things from our talks and our training sessions, we want them to remember what we've said and then apply it. Helping them remember it in a fun way seems to me to make perfect sense.
Yeah, well, you'll see on the board that my goal for today is Tam O'Shanter, because I'm doing Tam O'Shanter, the Scottish poem, this evening, and I've been using a memory palace technique. Which is all about that. So in the memory palace, you build up a picture, but it's more effective if it's not just the picture of the thing, which in this case is like old Scots done in terms of how you say it. So very weird pictures, but you build up the picture, but you can also make sounds and tastes and colors and movement. And then, so that's the first bit getting in your head. And then when you actually speak it out loud, that codes it in another way. So by the end, you can remember the whole poem all the way through and not have to be going, oh, what's the next word?
Excellent. But, yeah. And drifting onto another topic from our previous conversation, one of the things that improv, a love that you and I both share, is about celebrating mistakes and how valuable that can be in a corporate culture when a lot of organisations are all about failing faster so that they can innovate and reach success sooner. And I know that you do that in clowning. So can you explain a bit more about that?
I think that speaking, I've come to this conclusion, I think speaking is more like clowning than it is almost everything else. I think maybe magic is closer, is in close to it, but it's like it's further away from acting in terms of performance, but it is closer to clowning, because in clowning you're finding that version of yourself that is the most vulnerable, and then mistakes become the funny things. So like it's all about playing the audience, and it's all about reading the audience and what are the audience liking. And a lot of the times when you make a mistake as a clown, the audience love it, so you do it again. So then it becomes not a mistake, which in improv, well, in musical improv, that's the thing. If you make a mistake, just repeat the mistake, and then it becomes actually intended, which is also the case in kind of acting based improv. You know, everyone jumps on the mistake and makes it good, don't they?
These creative arts are giving speakers and trainers and performers skills that will help them even with the serious aspect of what they do. What it's done for me anyway is make me more spontaneous, more able to respond in the moment, ready to answer any question, and not in a panic if things don't go to plan. So it's like a spontaneity muscle that it builds while being a lot of fun to learn.
Yeah, it also allows it. What I've noticed in myself doing all of this work on myself, because you know I do it for fun because I enjoy that, but also I need to be the best performer that I can be if I'm going to teach other people to be the best performers that they can be. But I've noticed that in the rest of my life, I've become a better communicator as well. Because, you know, I'm a shy person by nature. I'm a, you know, robotics guy. I'll just sit behind a computer and not talk to people by nature. But in doing all of this work, it allows you to bring that best version of yourself to conversations. And, you know, when you make mistakes in a conversation, which we often do, before I would just sort of revert back into myself and think, oh no, I said that thing, that was terrible, that was the wrong way to do it, which completely cuts you off. But what I've learned now is that you just play with that a bit more, and then that becomes a thing that people enjoy of that conversation, because you say, oh, remember when that person said that, and we all had a good laugh. Whereas what I would normally do is just hide away, and then that doesn't give anyone the possibility of laughing to it. They just think, what's wrong with him, you know?
It's really interesting how many of us are shy, and yet we go out on stage and we either try to entertain or inform, or a combination of both. So I know that my book has been informed by my improv experience, and some of the games and activities I've learned through doing improv have turned into icebreakers and energizers that anyone can adapt and use for their own learning outcomes. And I know that you said in your own training and coaching that you do, there are some exercises you use to stretch people out of their comfort zone so that they can be really authentic and in the moment, and therefore do a better job. Can you talk about some of them?
A lot of the time I talk about voice, because that's when my mum was a voice coach, and I kind of learnt voice coaching from her, and then I've trained myself subsequently in voice coaching. So a lot of the things that I get people to do are actual voice exercises. I'll get them up and stretching and making noises and running around and jumping and things. Well, not running around, running on the spot. And that's kind of necessary in the same way as we were talking, because people need to be able to feel it. Like I could talk for ages about the science of breathing and what the different muscles between your ribs are doing, but people are going to be thinking, why are you telling me this? You know, or this is just weird science. Why are you, like, what's the purpose for me? So if you get people up and trying it out and supplement it with the science, then they know why you're giving them the exercise, which I think is important. And also they learn the information more. And I think that people, like, one of the things I've noticed, I come from an acting background, not myself, as I say, I'm an engineer, but my whole family are actors. And in acting, people are used to doing things if you tell them to. So if you say, go and lie on the floor, actors will go and lie on the floor. No big deal. But in a business world, people need to know that there's a purpose behind what they're doing. And I think that if you've got a good purpose and you can explain it in a way that is kind of compelling for them, you can really get them to do anything, because there's a point to it. And then afterwards they go, oh yeah, I did actually feel that. And then they feel, okay, it was okay. Like I might have felt silly for a while, but there was a purpose.
Interesting, isn't it, how much power you have on stage and how obedient audiences are. You're in that role when you're an audience member, just to do what you're told, even if you hate it.
Yes, although I think that you do need to have the audience on your side.
Which leads to the next question, really. It's the responsibility of the person on stage to make that a safe place for people to get involved in this fun and game approach to learning, and to make it okay, perhaps by being the silliest one in the room. It's one of the ways I do it.
You've got to be comfortable with making a fool of yourself, because if you make a fool of yourself the most and don't seem like you're worried about it, then the audience kind of thinks, well, at least I'm not going to seem as silly as them. But if you try and make a fool of yourself but you're not fully comfortable with the mode that you're doing it in, I think that can probably put people off as well, because they feel you're a bit inauthentic, which is why clowning is amazing. Because if you do feel inauthentic, you just totally like celebrate that, and then people feel happy about it. You know, so if you were to come up and be like, oh, I'm really nervous today, you would properly address that, and then people will go, okay, he said he's nervous. Whereas what people will often do when they are nervous, particularly if they're going to do something big with their body, then they kind of hide it, and they try to put across a persona that is someone who's confident, but they don't feel confident, and the audience can tell immediately this person is not showing us who the real person is, who they are, and so they're less likely to go with you on some of these crazier things that you might do.
Yes, I know if you're doing voice training, you're going to be doing breathing and voice activities. Are there any icebreakers, energizers, other activities you generally use in your regular sessions?
It depends on what I'm teaching, really. I try to incorporate at least a few bits into any speech. So like I've got one that's about how to structure a speech and how to rehearse it. So in that one, I'll just get people up, and after having done a kind of thinky exercise to work out what their structure they need, just get them to speak it out loud a few times, because most of the time people don't do that when they're preparing presentations. So just the simple fact of having spoken it out loud 3 times and then again, and realizing, oh, that actually was easier this 4th time I did it, it makes people realize, oh, speaking out loud is a good way to rehearse, which for us is obvious, but many people don't appreciate that.
I guess that people that come on your sessions, they already know they're going to be doing voice training. So they probably have an expectation that they're going to have to practice as well as just sit and listen.
Not necessarily. So people want to talk on behalf of their business often, and that is what I talk about in like the blurb. I have included things like interactive, and people in the marketing department have said get rid of the word interactive because people won't want to come along. People who come back a second time, sure, they know that I'm going to do something, but in terms of getting people on side, I think of it as having 4 levels. There are 4 levels of interaction, and you kind of have to go through each one, even if it's people that know you, just to get people into that space. The first one is to ask people to interact with themselves. So, i.e., think of a time, or something that's within themselves, but they're actually going from receptive mode into active mode, which I think is important. So you can get them to do that first. Then you can get the audience to interact together doing the same thing. So that's like, even if it's just the classic, like everyone put their hand up type thing, although I tend to do things like everyone scratch their head, or everyone pull their chin, or just something that's different. Everyone give me a wink, so different from putting your hand up, if that's something they've been doing all day. But that allows them to not feel that they're the only person that's doing it. They're all doing it, and it's fine. Level 3 is to ask them to interact with someone around them, which is okay, because usually you sit next to someone that you know, and you can, if you're really shy, you can talk to that person, or you can turn and talk to someone you don't know. And after that, get people to interact in groups, or stand up and do things in groups, if because then there's that kind of feeling of, well, it's still not me. And beyond that, you can get individuals to come up. Sometimes you'll get individuals who are, they're more capable of, or they really want to get involved. So you can just use them as the kind of voice of the audience and get them to do the activity, and they'll be happy with it.
I agree. It's this gradual build up that makes it okay for people to get involved, and again, make it feel safe for them, because you don't want them to come to your session and not have a good time.
Yeah.
And I
But yeah,
think interaction does have a bad reputation, doesn't it? That people imagine they're going to be embarrassed, or they'll have to do role plays, or they'll have to be made to look a fool.
yeah, and I think that's sort of fair as well, because I think I see a lot of people not using it properly and not getting people on side and not letting people know that they are also a person and can find this scary, or not even just even not addressing it, you know. So you get people who's even, again, the like classic put your hand up. You'll get people who say put your hand up right at the beginning of their speech, which is not the right time to do it, but put your hand up with this, and the audience is tired and they don't really want to. And instead of saying, it's okay, it's 3 o'clock, I know everyone's arms get very heavy after 3, or something to throw it away and let people know it's all right, they'll start berating the audience for not doing the thing properly. And then the audience feels like, what are you doing? You know? So you really need to be part of the audience, or let them know that you're one of them in that sort of thing, when it comes to interaction.
What other tips do you have for people who might be more of a traditional speaker or trainer, who are used to doing the chalk and talk type of lecture rather than risking any kind of audience participation?
I think it goes back to being comfortable with it. And I think that you need, if you think of yourself as someone who's more traditional and just likes giving kind of clear information, you're you need to get past that. Like, it's in the same way that I do a lot things beyond what I teach people so that I feel comfortable with them. I think you need to go into situations where you're really, really interacting with people. And then when you get on stage, you can do something a lot smaller and it's not going to seem strange. But I kind of feel like tacking things on that you've not experienced yourself, almost. Even if, I don't know, just coming off the top of my head, like even if you were just to get a group of friends or fellow speakers around and try out some of the more wacky tasks that you could give the audience to do, and just really, really own it until you feel comfortable with it, that will help when you bring it on stage, because it will seem the most natural thing in the world. Whereas if you just try and go, oh yeah, I've got this in the book, I'm just going to, oh well, I'll tack that into the speech there, and you don't really try it out for yourself and feel what it's like in the audience, you're possibly making things too difficult for yourself.
I'd say you don't have to use audience participation. Of course, it's not compulsory. I just know in my experience that it does seem to engage attendees much more than expecting them to sit and listen. And one way of engaging audiences that is much more traditional is storytelling. And I know that's something that you also do a lot of.
Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about that?
So, well, I do a show with my sister and my dad. We're a very creative group, which is Story Builders, and it's a thing for kids. We teach them story structure, and that is all audience interaction, in fact. So we go through it and we get ideas from the audience depending on what we need at different points in the story, and then we tell them the story afterwards. And that's based on my intense story geekery that I've had from writing films for 12 years. And just going, how does this work? Very engineering, like, how does this work? How can I make these stories work better? And watching lots of films and kind of pulling them apart. So that's the kind of structural part that I teach people. And then there's the storytelling of it as well.
Wow, you've got a real range of things you're involved in. You've talked about robotics and storytelling and improv and clowning and voice coaching and a whole wide range of interests and expertise. How can people reach you if they want to find out more?
You can find me at createclarifyarticulate.com, which is the process by which you turn an idea into something that someone can understand.
And is there anything else that you thought of, that you pre-prepared, that you'd like to say in the context of icebreakers and energizers and such like?
I was just actually looking at a blog post I wrote ages ago, which is all about how to. You can search for it. It says it's called 5 Rules for Effective Audience Interaction in Speeches. I mean, it kind of talks about those 4 levels that people go through. As with everything, you can talk about it until the cows come home, but I feel get out and do them and just practice and really own them, and then you'll know what we're talking about.
Own them and enjoy them yourself, because if you don't enjoy them yourself, then nobody else will either.
Exactly.
We all need more fun and enjoyment.